When we first started wrestling, we wrestled in a machine shop where we had radiators, and there was no way that you could get any mats in there except those old hair mats. They were up on the second floor, and any time that we had a match or something, we'd have to carry our mats from another building over to the gym. And the radiators were a big problem in that lots of times, you know, if you were wrestling and a guy was mad at another guy, he ended up on that radiator, and you could hear a little ouch. That's minimizing it. And you know, on occasion you'd have burns. They weren't mat burns, they were radiator burns. When we first started wrestling, we wrestled on hair mats, and most people don't know what hair mats are, but anyway, they were old gray mats that we tied together, and we had a mat cover that went over them. The second year that we had wrestling, the athletic director bought us a half a mat apiece, and there were 4 high schools at that time, and when you would go wrestle another high school, you take your half mat and we'll say go to Hillcrest or Glendale or Parkview, and you'd take your half mat and you'd tape them together. They were 24 by 24 and they were square mats, and many times the out of bounds was the edge of the mat was the gym floor. And I'd tell my wrestlers, I said, make sure you keep wrestling until you hear a whistle or you hit the free throw line. Well, you know, where the free throw line is in a basketball court, you had to go about 20 feet on the floor before you hit it. But on the other hand, you know, you have mat burns in wrestling, you have floor burns in basketball. We had a lot of floor burns too. Okay, the Andersons, I had 3 Andersons that wrestled for me, and they were all very good wrestlers. In fact, we had a lot of wrestling families, and I know in the last time that we talked, I neglected some of them, and when you've coached 43 years, you have a tendency to forget things like your own name sometimes. But the Anderson, we're all 3 here at the same time, and when you have 3, and there was only 12 weights back then, that's pretty good when you can have one team make up a fourth of your team. The Hilburns, actually there were 2 Hilburns, and they were cousins, and Tim Hilburton took 5th in the state, and his cousin Tony took 2nd in the state. And there was also some other Hilburns that wrestled, but they were all related, but they weren't brothers. The Robbins is the only family that I had that had 4 wrestlers, and they wrestled. Dennis was the first one, and he wrestled. He was one of the best wrestlers that I had, even though he didn't place in the state, but they were all state qualifiers. And then Jeff, who was the last one, placed 5th in the state. The Taylor twins, who were move-ins from Waynesville, the Bransons and the Minesons were early wrestlers, and there was 2 or 3 of each one of those. And like I say, when you can have 2 or 3 brothers, if they don't wrestle here, they'll wrestle at home, and usually they'll turn out pretty good. When we first started wrestling, there was only 4 teams in Springfield, the city schools, and Seneca had started wrestling a couple of years before. But within a year or 2, you know, teams like Neosho, Bonnet, and a little later Ozark and Nixa, and within probably 5 or 6 years, most of the schools that are in the surrounding area had wrestling. But at first, we were the first ones outside of Seneca in southwest Missouri.